Aw, man, would you look at this? Some station I had in my channels collection has disappeared. I know it was on Plex based on its name, but that's about all I know about it. I have no idea what this station was. Because I don't know what it was, I don't know if I can just easily replace it with something on Pluto or Samsung. This is very annoying. It feels like there needs to be a simple way to deal with this type of thing where stations are leaving and coming and going and moving from all these various services that we have available to integrate. You know, it reminds me a lot of Stream Link Manager for channels. Now, if I go ahead and I look for a show, we've got this one high potential here on top. And we could call it the parent, the thing I actually care about. And it has a number of children. It's available on Amazon, it's available on Fubo, it's available on Hulu, whatever. I only care about one of them. I don't need to actually know where it is if it's on one of my services. That's what makes it available to me. And I know that by my settings. So, okay. I look at my settings and I have subscribed to Hulu here. Perfect. So now that show will show up with a Hulu link based upon how I have set it up. And if it moves to one of my other services, great, it's completely background to me. Couldn't we do the same with stations on playlists? The answer now is yes. If we scroll down to the bottom here, we have a new option called Use Playlist Manager. Let's turn that on and click Save. And you notice that suddenly on the side here, I have a new option called Playlists. Let's take a look. Looking inside, there's not a lot to see because there's nothing here yet. It's the starting point. So we'll come back to this. But let's pop over to Manage Playlists. Much like we just saw, we need to prioritize our playlists, but that means we also need to add them. And we can add anything into here. So hold on one second and I will load up a whole bunch in here. Be right back. Alright, I've gone ahead and entered all of my various playlists. You can see I've got some that are, we'll look at the Plex Grace Note here. You can see that I've got the link to that, and it's using Grace Note, which means I don't need guide data, as opposed to the electronic program guide version, where I do need guide data. There are also the various formats to deal with, HLS or MPEG-TS, so my PBS ones are MPEG-TS. And I can also choose to activate or inactivate them, so if I don't want Samsung activated, I could inactivate it. And this is our starting point. This is how it knows what we want. If I scroll up, you can see I also took the time to prioritize them. So when we get through all this, I'm going to have a bunch of stations, and then I'm going to have a preference order for those stations. I want it from channels over the air, then from my PBS one, and from my TV one, then from my E Plus one, then my Plex Grid and 2B Grace Notes, etc. And these are completely customizable to me, how I want it. If I inactivate something, it won't use that one. It'll just skip over it and go to the next. It's going to go through an order priority and say, hey, is this station available? If so, use the highest priority playlist. Take it from that. And if it's not, it'll keep going until it checks to see if there are no more. Now you can see, obviously, I mentioned the channels once. You can actually bring in channels, m3u's, directly into this as well, because there's some things that are on fast stations that are also on channels TV and are on over the air. Because at the end of the day, I only need one type of station for any given thing that I want. There's also another option down here where we can actually upload files too. So if I have my own little one, so I'm just going to upload this example guy, I could use this example playlist, and all I got to do is copy and paste that and drop it off into here, and it'll use it, assuming I give it a name. I'm just going to call you delete me, and I can add you, and now it's in here too. So now it's also one of my options, and you can see it's on our priority here. So I have complete control over these playlists. So then the next area is really about getting what are the stations to begin with. So I'm going to click this update station list, and it's going to run for a couple of minutes. So I'll be right back when that finishes up. All right, we're back, and you now notice a big change here. I've now got unassigned stations of 1,996. Quite a few to go through. So what we're dealing with here is what we were showing before in Stream Link Manager, where we're going to go ahead and say, okay, well, these need to be assigned to a parent or need to be ignored because I don't care about them. And then once we're assigning to parents, some are going to end up having just a one-to-one relationship. Some are going to have a one-to-many. So I have about, 87 million versions of Core TV. So a lot of those are going to end up under redundant. So now if we expand under unassigned stations here, we've got a big old list of that nearly 2,000 stations based upon what I did. So let's start off simple. We've got this first one here, O's replay. And for now, I'm just going to choose this button on the far right that says Make Parent. And let's go over to Parent Stations now. And you can see it's created a parent called OO Replay. And there's some options here under Parents, right? We can put in an alternate guide ID, we can put in our own logos, we can change the channel number, which I'll get to later, we can give it a Grace Note ID, we can even say we have a preference on our playlist to override the priority order. And if we go to modify our assigned stations, you can see that O's replay is here now. So it was all that same thing in unassigned, except now it has an assigned parent station, and that parent station is available to assign to others. Let's look at this another way. So you can see that I've got two 21 Jump Streets. Let's say I do want 21 Jump Street. So I'm going to make the first 21 Jump Street a parent, and it doesn't matter which one I make a parent, by the way. And that'll reload. And now my second one, I can assign it the parent of 21 Jump Street. So now I'm going to use the Set Parent button. And if I look at my assigned stations here, now you can see I've assigned those two 21 Jump Streets, and one's on Plex, one's on Samsung. So when we end up parsing this in the end, based on my priority order, the Plex one is higher priority than the Samsung one. So long as it's available, it will pick that up. If 21 Jump Street is to leave Plex, then it'll pick up the Samsung one, assuming it still exists. This way, I don't need to bother with which one it is using. There are a few other options there. Like I mentioned, we've got the ignore option, so I can ignore it, and I'll set that parent. And now I've got my ignored, but at the end of the day, it's kind of the similar idea. Its parent is ignore. So it won't be assigned to any parent, it won't be parsed through. And then I can do all of this en masse. I can make a whole bunch of things ignored. I can make a parent of multiple things. So I could say I want to make you a parent, I want to ignore you, make you a parent, and I don't know, ignore you and make you a parent. And then here, just to demonstrate this as well, I will make one of you O's replay. And I can now click Save All. And at this point, it'll parse through that entire list one by one and do those assignments in mass. So we can do that as well. And I will let this run and be right back. All right, so that finished up. And all the assignments I made are now over here. And once again, from before, if you remember, I set this to the wrong parent. So I'm going to go ahead and ignore it now, actually, and change its parent. And then return to the main page. Now, it's a function of how many stations are listed here, how long that process is going to take. At the moment, I've still got nearly 2,000, so it took a little longer to parse through all of them. But as I go through a whole bunch and I save them all, then if there are less there, it'll take less time to save them, longer to modify them. So you're just parsing one way or the other. But you can see those things that I made parents, 24-hour free movies, 48 hours, 4 UVs are now available. So now I can assign those to all of these guys and go through the same process. So I could go through this entire list, go on my top levels, and make those choices. And there's some situations where, I'm going to want to pick a different one to be a parent just because, I prefer its name a certain way. So you can see, look at these ones, the All Reality by WeTV, All Reality WeTV, All Reality WeTV lowercase. I might like one of them and pick that one to be the parent, just because all it's really doing is taking its name. But even if I don't like the name, I can always go to parent stations and I can change the names and save that, or I can create my own parents. So let me update everything here and I will be right back. All right, so now I've gone ahead and I've pretty much made all my assignments. If we go over to our main page here, you can see everything's been assigned now. Some things are ignored, a lot of them. Some things have been assigned and some things are redundant. So this gives you a quick glimpse of how things look. You can see my unassigned list is now empty. So in the future, when we update the station list, it will give us only new ones that are available in there. By the way, if we pop over to home for a second, you can actually see in my notifications that as we were adding stations, they got added. So this is another area that tells me what was added, what was removed, what was modified. So it is available here as well. So just something to keep in mind. Now back in our playlist, we go over to our parent stations for a second. You can see that, yes, I've done a lot of assignments. Sometimes I've created stations like this, so I've got a few different versions of an ABC station, and the way that I get it from the guide isn't very great. So I'll show you this in a second. So I created one for the over-the-air one for the TV one, and one for my other over-the-air one. So let's pop over to a couple of places. Let us go over to Modify Assigned Stations, and we'll let this load up real fast. And if we scroll down, you can actually see the ones that we've got assigned, right? This is the one I said I was assigning for each of them. The TV one, the over-the-air Boston one, and the over-the-air Rhode Island one. But the way they all came in was ABC. Not the most helpful. So this way I know what each one is. It makes it much easier to see. So at this point we have everything we need, right? We've got all of our stations. They are assigned to parents. The parents have a order of priority within them. So let's go ahead and do the most logical thing that we need to do, which is actually get an m3u, an electronic program guide. So I'm going to click the button for that here, and we're going to let it go. And all right, that finished up. And now we ended up with some playlists and some electronic programming guide. You can see at top we've got the Grace Note ones. So the Grace Note ones are ones that have Grace Note IDs, which means they get their guide data from that. So they don't need electronic programming guides, as opposed to the non-Grace Note ones below. We also have the different formats for HLS and MPEG-TS, depending upon which one we need, because each method is different within channels for how it parses it. But these are now literal m3u files. So if we pop open this first one here, and I'm just going to open up as a text file, we've now gone through and we've said, oh, well, what's a parent and what's a child and what's the only child for it, and give me the default one. So you can see like those ABC ones we were looking at before. You can see something like, let's scroll down to here. We've got Court TV, which if I go back into here and we look at our assigned stations, I go down to Court TV. You can see I have many Court TVs that are all assigned to Court TV from pretty much every source under the sun, including some different spellings of the name. And based on my priority order, we got the one that's coming from my TVE. Because if we go back and look at parents, and we go down to Court TV, you can see I've actually done the preferred channels TVE override. So even though my playlist says my over-the-air one should be higher priority, I've said I've preferred the TVE one. So just showing you all of that in action. And then also in action, if we head back over into channels here and I go to my sources, you can see I've added them. So the same idea. I've got the Grace Note HLS, the Grace Note MPEG-TS, and the non-Grace Note HLS here. And let's open up this one. We'll just manage the lineup. And you can see all those stations mapped as normal. So again, with the Court TV, if I were to lose the TVE version, it wouldn't matter because it would just get replaced with the next highest priority, which will be the over-the-air ones. And if those disappeared, it wouldn't matter. It would go to the next highest priority on the playlist, each way down. But I'd still end up with the same station here, which means this is the same thing I can use over and over and over again because it has a unique channel ID that we've created. So the details may be different each time, but so long as this channel ID is the same, everything else will work. And the way Playlist Manager works as well is it goes not just for what's the highest priority for any item, but for every piece of item. So for instance, this description that's here is not coming from the TVE. It's coming from one of the other playlists. And that's because the TVE one doesn't have a description. But Playlist Manager checks through each field, each possibility, and gets a complete picture as much as possible for everything it has. But it mostly needs to know which one do you want to play. And that's how it determines that. So that gets everything that is in there into place. And you can see as well, so let's actually edit the settings on our non-Grace Note one. You can see how I got it in here was I used those links that were available for the m3u and the electronic guide. Now obviously, clicking these buttons and waiting each time, not the best. So if we go over into settings, we actually gained a couple settings that I didn't show you before. We can set our update station list to run once per day at any time we want. And we can update our m3u and XML guide data starting at any time and then running on a cycle, either every hour, 3 hours, 6, 12, or 24. Those options are all available, and they're very similar to what's in channels, so you can try to be a little bit behind it so that it'll be loading those. So if I had this set for 10:30 a.m. and I said to run every 12 hours, it'll run again at 10:30 p.m. If I say every 6 hours, it's going to run next at 4:30 p.m. and then 10:30 p.m. and then 4:30 a.m., etc. So it'll just continue to run the cycle. So this just gives you control over how you want to think about the when of things happening. The other options I didn't discuss were down here. We have a start station number and a max number of stations. So I had previously set mine to 100,000. The default is actually 10,000. But you can set that to be any number you want it to be. And as you saw as well, you can override those station numbers if you have particular things you want for a parent. This other one down here, the max stations per m3u, this is how many appear in each one of those files that we're creating. So if I go ahead and I drop this to, let's just say 100, and I'm going to click save, and I go back to my playlists. Now let's go ahead and update these playlists again and see what happens. All right, so that finished up, and we have something very different. Now you can see we ended up with 3 Grace Note ones for our HLS and 2 for our non-Grace Note ones, plus our MPEG-TS one under Grace Note. Now that 750 number that we changed to 100, that's going to be how many stations are going to be in the file. At the time of this recording, channels maxes out at 750, so that's the default. But you can always change it if that changes in the future or if you want it for more efficiency. So for instance, because there's only 100 stations in here, that means the electronic programming guide as well is smaller because it only takes for the stations that are in here. So now there are 100 of them, and there are 100 of them in there. Same thing, so whatever is left over plus whatever is left over. That's how it creates all of them. And that's how it's going to always manage to make sure that you don't have too many. But other than that, that's it. So this is how we can now control and manage playlists as if they were any other piece of content. Every station, every m3u, every electronic programming guide is parsed down into much more simple and manageable bytes for you to use with Playlist Manager for Channels, a custom add-on for Streamlink plus Files plus Playlist Manager for Channels. Enjoy!